This story begins when it started to get dark outside. The girl waited until that time and ran into the woods. She went there all alone, and she wanted to do it without anyone noticing. She had to find a place before dawn, but she was going there for a reason, a very important mission. On every full moon day, a ghost spring appears in the woods near the palace. Rumor has it that the water from this spring contains mystical powers, a power that can bring even the dead back to life. Before, Sasha had been warned that a man who entered the forest on the full moon may never come out of there alive again. And to control it, there are men standing around the whole forest to make sure no one gets in. But somehow the girl managed it. She hid behind a tree because she knew she wouldn't get another chance. She had a very important goal, but to do that, she needed to find water that could cure her mom's illness. Turns out Sasha's almost there, and luckily it wasn't difficult thanks to the map, when suddenly, she noticed a very bright light and immediately decided to run in that direction. This place was like a barely visible portal. Then she walked through it. Sasha made sure it was exactly the place she was looking for. It's Ghost Spring. It had very beautiful crystal clear water. Well, since the girl had very little time, we had to hurry. She had a small bottle with her, which she had prepared especially to fill with water. When suddenly, when she was about to finish her work, someone turned to her and asked, "Who's here?" But Sasha didn't yet realize who she had heard. It turned out to be a guy she'd never seen before. The girl immediately noticed a lot of bruises and minor injuries on him. To begin with, she decided to introduce herself and greet him. She said her name was Sasha Corsico, to which the guy replied that he didn't recall such a surname. During the conversation, she noticed a single badge on his clothes that symbolized the royal coat of arms of Vasilo, and then suggested that maybe this guy could be Prince Paris Vladimiro, the heir to the royal family, whom everyone was waiting for a long time. But unfortunately, the queen died right after the birth of the child. The ruling family has been plagued by a series of tragedies, small and large. Because of this, the guy was often called the Prince of Bad Luck. Meanwhile, he's trying to ask if the girl doesn't realize what kind of place she's come to, and what she could expect here, because usually there is a punishment for such things. The guy said that because of her age, she doesn't understand the seriousness of her actions, to which she thought he was the same age as her. And yet, she decided to tell him the reason she was here, that her mom had a very serious illness. And Sasha learned that this water can bring back to life even dead people, to which the guy replied that, "How can you believe it? Because no one has not yet proved it." To which the girl replied that she would rather die trying to learn or fix something than sit around and do nothing. But the guy didn't understand how one could go to such an act for another person. But the girl just couldn't look at the fact that no one was even trying to help her mom. So Sasha's the only one who cares. If this water really can revive the dead, her mom will be saved. That's why she decided long ago that she would do anything for it. They continued to talk, and gradually learned information about each other, when suddenly, an unforeseen situation occurred. Some monster tried to attack the girl. It looks too huge, and the likes of which Sasha has never seen before. She tried to draw the prince's attention to this monster, and hoped he could somehow save them, because she couldn't do it on her own. But unfortunately it was too late. He stealthily approached her, and immediately raised to a very high altitude, and of course in this situation, Sasha is absolutely powerless. She couldn't even move or have any effect on what was happening. The only person who could help her was the prince, but surprisingly he was completely calm, as if he sees something like this every day. He tried to explain that he should have listened to him and not stayed in that place, and afterward asked what she was going to do now, for she had been too sure of herself not long ago. The girl asked him to help, but would he do nothing, as suddenly he asked what he would get in return for it, to which Sasha replied that he could then ask for anything. After that he didn't hesitate for a second, and immediately sprang into action. Apparently he really knows a thing or two, and knows how to take down such a monster. Perhaps he has some experience already, and because of that, he was so quick to focus and do whatever was necessary to keep the girl safe. As a result, the guy did manage to destroy the monster, but the amazing thing is that it only took a few seconds. The monster just falls apart, and at that moment, Sasha saw in him a real savior, because if it were not for him, she would have long ago died. And of course she's eternally grateful to him for that. He did what a hero would do. Meanwhile, the Corsico estate. The girl was already in her room, with an assistant watching over her. Apparently she was a little hurt after all. and the prince carried her straight home, because a little while before she had told her name and where she lived. For the moment, Sasha is unconscious and someone is watching her. These people talk about how it was impossible to accept an invitation from the royal family, but the man is sure that since she had already been chosen as a candidate for princess consort, he couldn't ignore His Majesty's orders. Apparently this man, he is the girl's father. He didn't understand why she believed that there really was some kind of magic water. Sometime later, the count and his daughter went out into the street. It was evident from his face that he was very sorry that such a situation had occurred, for it was a very serious offense on the part of the girl. As it turned out, the guy came to them. He said that a man should realize that violating such laws will immediately lead to punishment, but he's ready to forget about this situation. Does it have anything to do with the fact that the girl owes him one wish he never got? Only the man doesn't know it yet. He thanked the guy for his mercy, because if it wasn't for him, his daughter could have died. After that meeting, the man went back to the house and stayed with Sasha the whole time. He thought about Prince Paris. Usually all people had a bad opinion of him. They call him the devil's child, but so far he didn't seem to be like that. Then, the assistant decided to talk to him. She apologized and said she understood that she shouldn't say that, to which the man asked what she meant. The girl suggested one option, ask the wizard for help, but it seems that the man was against this idea, because he was sure that they could not be trusted, and they were unreliable people, to which the girl replied that she agreed with him, but it did not seem that any doctors could help in any way. She tried to convince him that this was the only option in which they would at least try to do something, because obviously the situation was very complicated and there was no time to lose. Since it was a relatively safe option, that was the most important thing. So the man forgot about not fully trusting wizards and doubting their abilities. He feels like if he doesn't do his best, he'll regret it later. So maybe he will actually listen to the assistant and her advice. Was sure it was pointless though, and if it actually helped, it would be a miracle. And yet, what was this wish that the girl had to fulfill for the prince to save her? Because there's still no word on that. The thing was, when the monster was slowly falling apart, it was clear that there was no longer any danger. And the prince has done his job. So what will the girl owe him in return? Even she doesn't realize it. At one point, the prince came up to her and reminded her that she had promised him something and was willing to do anything on any terms. He took her in his arms, and afterwards Sasha asked what he wanted, to which he replied that when the time came, he would ask her to take his side. But what it could mean, and when that time will come, is also unknown. But apparently he knows what he's talking about. Meanwhile, there's some kind of battle going on between a man and a girl. The girl had blonde hair and red eyes, and the guy was a little taller than her and had light yellow hair. It turns out it's been a long time since then, and this girl is Sasha Corsico. At that moment, the assistant noticed her, and apparently she didn't like something. But before that, Sasha had been warned by the guy that she was coming, and she was ready for it. It turns out it was dangerous for the girl to be outside in the middle of the day. But Sasha replied that she couldn't skip sword training because she had to learn how to stand up for herself. Except that it was before her, because activity at this time of day can weaken her. Besides, the bathtub was already ready for her, and the assistant offered to hurry up so that the water in it wouldn't get cold. After that, the girl said goodbye to that guy. Turns out his name is Alec. It's time to take a bath, and for that, you have to prepare for it. Sasha still hasn't gotten used to it. The thing is, it's been 10 years since she was rescued by the prince. Her father still asked for help from the wizard to save her after all. But after his magic spell, the girl looked completely different. Plus, not only does she now have a new look, she is now a vampire. Now, she should not be in the sun for long periods of time, or at all. When her assistant was brushing her hair, as she usually did, the girl asked Olga a question. She wondered if she was afraid of her, since she'd recently become a real vampire. The girl kept thinking about it, and didn't know how to ask her about it, because it's the kind of question that a lot of people don't usually answer as they really think they do. At this moment, Olga looked at her, and asked if the girl could really think it was really so. Assistant tried to explain that if she was afraid of her, she wouldn't be her assistant. And since she's still in that seat, it's an indication that Olga trusts her and isn't afraid of anything. It's amazing that Sasha is probably the only vampire who worries about and doesn't want to be feared by those around her. To make the girl calm down a little not to think about it, Olga said that, whatever the situation, she would never stop trusting her, and that if she could make Sasha human again, Olga would even die for it. That's how much of a loyal helper she is. She really treats her very well, and she's sure Sasha will never hurt her. Then the assistant remembered that perhaps the girl had been hungry for some time, so she offered her a drink. It turns out that this is a very healthy drink that a girl needs to consume at least once every few days. It's an amazing remedy that is good for her health, as well as getting rid of the chance of getting sick, and has a similar property to vitamins, only for vampires. As we know, sometimes they can be too violent and have a constant desire to destroy anything living. So, this drink will curb such a desire. As it turned out, after a situation that happened 10 years ago, there were unpleasant consequences. She can live as a normal person, but it will never be possible to give birth to a child. And also, the wizard warned her that it was important for him to remember that the girl needed to beware of poisonous people. The man didn't even know that such a thing was possible. But as it turned out, it was really true. It's rare, but such people exist. The poison can easily destroy vampires and monsters. And also, she has to drink that special drink all the time. This will help her to somehow protect herself from such people and strengthen her immunity. Meanwhile, the very guy Prince, who saved the girl many years ago, constantly sees her in dreams. And what's most amazing is that it still happens today, and very often. And also, they're not just dreams where he sees this girl. They're real nightmares that keep him awake all night. But why is this happening? Are they going to see each other soon? Or is this their destiny? And maybe because of this, some force is doing everything possible to make her appear to him even in his dreams. Of course, he was getting a little tired of it, for it was not very pleasant to fall asleep and to think with certainty that he was going to have a terrible dream again. At this moment, an assistant came into his room, wondering why the prince was awake so early. Because he needs to rest a lot more now that he's getting ready for the wedding. This is his third wedding, and this time, he's marrying the young lady of the House of Hasman. But after a lot of experience, this time the guy is pretty sure it's just another girl who won't last long and can't handle anything. So he doesn't care who she turns out to be anymore. After 2 failed attempts, he had lost confidence that he would ever have a good relationship. But still, what does he mean by that? And for what reason he still hadn't found this very bride, with whom there would be no trouble? But was it really, all this time? The problem wasn't the girls. It was what awaited them next. The moment had come when he needed to pick out a suitable outfit, when suddenly, he decided to wonder how many princess candidates there had been 10 years ago. To which his aide asked why he was so sudden about it, inquired. But the prince replied that the aide might not answer it. It's becoming very interesting to find out why his 2 previous fiancées couldn't handle something, and if the problem was really not with them, but with him. When the prince was ready, there was a little time left before the ceremony began. The lad sincerely hoped that this time, this girl would survive, and what had happened to the past ones would not happen to her. He still held out hope that there was one who had something that the previous ones didn't have. But what is it? And for what reason have his past brides died? And does this girl really have to be special? But if we remember that the prince for some reason dreams with Sasha, is she really the girl who is destined for him by fate? Right after his mother died, his father married another girl. Though she was a widow with a child, she was able to seduce him, and got pregnant by Prince Chelvi right after becoming queen. She wanted her son to take the throne very badly, so she always treated the prince badly in front of others. Meanwhile, the moment had arrived when all the invited guests had gathered in the hall. Each of them eagerly awaited the start of the ceremony, all of them reminiscing about his past weddings, and reminiscing about what had happened to his fiancées. They all started coughing and passed out right after the kiss and then died. But will it be the same this time? His new bride was walking to him by her father's side. He was very anxious that what everyone was so afraid of would not happen to his daughter, because the reason why it was happening to the girls is still unknown. The moment has come when the groom must see the face of his bride. It was evident from her face that she was very much afraid of the very moment when they should kiss, for she realized that after that, there was a chance of her being killed. But it couldn't be avoided, even though the bride was in tears and didn't want to do it. The moment came. All the guests and the prince himself were in suspense, and most of them were sure that the girl just won't survive, as suddenly, they realize that nothing is happening. She's suspiciously well, Everyone was really quite surprised because they thought she was doomed to die. The guests started to get very excited about it, but apparently they jumped to conclusions too soon. The girl suddenly started coughing, and the same thing happened to her that happened the last 2 times with his fiancées. She only lasted a little longer by a few seconds, but unfortunately so did she die, when suddenly something unforeseen happened. It seems that someone is already tired that because of the prince, a third girl has already died. His father came up to him and hit him very hard. The prince immediately fell to the floor because he didn't expect anyone to want to take revenge on him. The man said that from the day the prince was born, bad things started happening and a lot of girls are suffering because of it. The prince of course realized that it was his fault, but still, he didn't know what was causing it, or if there was anything he could do to fix it. And if he knew that, he would have long ago made sure his brides didn't die immediately after kissing at the wedding. But the fact that someone allows themselves to punish him for it and shoot him down, he doesn't like it. And this time, he won't forgive something like that. When his father decided to strike again, the prince reacted in time to prevent it from happening. And afterwards he said that he'd asked to stop having these weddings a long time ago, because he didn't want girls to suffer because of him. But it seems no one even wants to listen to him. The prince realized a long time ago that no one sees him as an adult, and they still think he's a little boy, who has to be taught everything, and can be told what to do in a situation, like now. As the man continued this conflict, his wife approached him and asked him to stop. She said that the prince is having a hard time as it is, so he needs to be calmed down instead of being taught and having conflicts. But the guy was well aware that she was only pretending to be good, and in fact, was not as kind as she was trying to appear to be. It was too disgusting for the prince to watch, because she was in his mom's shoes. This woman did all her bad deeds in secret, so that her husband would not know about it, and was sure that she was not capable of something bad, although the prince knew perfectly well what she was really like. Every time his father behaved as he had done recently, she would order him to be quiet, and at length give no food, or give that which had been spoiled, so as to produce poisoning. She carefully hid all these actions from her husband, because the main thing for her was not to let him know that she was very cruel to his son. And everyone came to the right moment to talk about Sasha. When the prince's father was talking to his wife, she offered him one option, because the man started talking about how no one would want to marry their daughter to a guy like that, to which the woman replied that she knew the Count of Corsico, and he just happens to have a daughter of the right age, Sasha. And all this time the dreams he'd had with her were for a reason. They were like warnings that they were going to see each other soon. When the lad heard her name and surname, he was very much surprised, for he never thought she could be proposed for him as a bride. And also, he didn't even think she'd somehow managed to survive that situation 10 years ago. Meanwhile, a very important letter has arrived at the palace where her family lives, and of this they were warned by their aide. He told them of the official decree of the palace. Their daughter, Lady Corsico, had been chosen as the bride of His Highness and future princess of the but the girl's father would not even consider such an offer, as his daughter's health condition would not allow him to accept such an ordeal. After his reply, people started discussing the topic as usual. Someone heard that the girl was starting to have skin problems due to direct sunlight. Man did not tell the real reason why his daughter could not become a prince's wife, or go out, for one reason. And the girl understood him. He's afraid people might find out she's a vampire, and the real truth is known to the small number of people her family trusts. Her assistant wanted to tell her some very important information that most likely few people in this palace know, namely that 3 princess candidates have already died, so it's very risky to accept such an offer. And it wouldn't be surprising if that's one of the reasons the girl's father is hesitant to accept such an offer from his parents. Now they really wondered if perhaps this prince was the devil's child, for even then, 10 years ago, the girl had been surprised that he had been able to protect her so easily, and had not for a moment feared that monster. It's like he knew his weaknesses, or he wasn't doing it the first time, which partially proves the fact that he's not just an ordinary prince, and maybe it has something to do with the fact that none of his brides could survive. Sasha was very surprised that not every girl could handle kissing him, but at the same time she wondered if she could stand the test or not. But at the same time she realized that it was a very big risk, so all her aides insisted that she take her time and make the right choice. Sometime later, she received some unknown letter that was meant for her personally. The assistant who brought it for the girl She was also very curious to know who it was from and what it said. She was eagerly awaiting any information, though she assumed it had something to do with the prince. And it turned out that the assistant wasn't wrong, although it was really obvious, especially given the events that had taken place. As it turned out, he decided to remind her that she had once made a promise to him, and wrote to recommend that she accept his offer. Of course, the girl immediately understood what he meant, because she remembered that day very well, even though a lot of time had passed since then. Meanwhile, at the palace where the prince's family lives, some girl speaks to her mom, and reminds her that the prince should go to Erica. This girl has dreamed all her life of being a prince's wife, because all she wants is him, to which her mom replies that in order for that to happen, she has to grow up a little, to which Erica reminds her that her mom promised that would happen someday. It turns out that she didn't want to marry the prince that she is now, but the woman's son, whose name is Chelvi. But in order to do that, they need to get rid of whoever's taking his place now to avoid further problems. At that moment, a woman asked her daughter to come to her because she wanted to say something very important that no one should hear. She told the girl that it would be his last wedding, for Lady Corsica would die. To which the girl asked how she knew that, because it might not happen. The woman replied that there had never been a situation where she had not gotten what she wanted, and her daughter confirmed this, because it had never really happened before. Then, the woman asked Erica to trust her, and promised it would be business as usual. After that, someone knocked on the door, and it turned out to be her husband. When the woman saw him, she immediately asked what she deserved such joy, because she thought that he would be busy all this day. He just wanted to know how the preparation for the wedding is going on. To which the woman replied that it was fine, and he could worry about nothing. She was trying to find his son a suitable bride, so he could become a respectable man. To which he replied that this would not happen, for Chelvi had a better chance, even though the woman agreed with him. She decided to pretend that for her, there was no which of the children she loved more. So I asked him not to speak so loudly about it because someone might hear it. During the conversation, it turned out that the prince's father had long ago decided that if another girl died, he would send him away from the palace grounds, and he would live separately, and possibly rid him of his prince status, which made this woman very happy, because that's what she wanted, but as usual, hid her real emotions. And then, he decided to ask her something, if she didn't know what the count insisted on a night wedding for, to which the woman replied that there was no problem with it anyway, and it would probably be much more interesting. Plus, they're in the wrong situation. Somehow they can choose or refuse some conditions, even though if it was a regular wedding, they would never listen to someone else's conditions. Meanwhile, the moment has arrived. Even though it's a beautiful event, all the guests are people, like going to an entertainment show, not to be happy for anyone. Inside, everything was incredibly beautiful, but no one paid attention to it, because everyone was only waiting for one thing, whether the next girl would hold out and not leave after kissing her. One day, they were to meet. This time, the prince was waiting for the bride with great interest, as today, she is special. Sasha haunted him for 10 years, even in his dreams. Despite the constant hardships, the guy's already accepted that his life can't get any worse. After his mother died, he forgot what love, support, and care was, and was constantly bullied, only because these men wanted to take his place. Even his own father treated him so, as if they were strangers, though sometimes even strangers treated him better than the people he lived with. Meanwhile, the doors open. Everyone is eager to see who the next girl will be. Everyone who agreed to be his wife knew the risks. But isn't Sasha embarrassed by anything? Usually during these events, the only person who constantly regrets their decision and wants to cancel is the father of each of the brides who are no longer there. And Sasha's father is no exception. He has experienced terrible emotions, and has been convinced many times that it was better not to do it. But how did the girl manage to convince her father that she had no other options? Did she really tell him about the desire to? As the girl was getting ready to go out, she had asked Olga many times about her appearance, to which the assistant replied that everything was just fine, and she had no reason to doubt it at all. Olga really admired the bride, and most of all she wished that she had not met the same fate as the 3 previous brides. The assistant also made sure to calm the girl's father down at least a little. She started talking to him about the atmosphere of the event, but apparently it was useless. The car never stopped presenting the most horrible consequences. At that moment, a girl came up to them, who was also in anticipation. Now she also knew what awaited her. Since the man did not support his daughter's decision, he asked, after all, she knows she could have refused the wedding, and afterwards asked to explain why she had to agree to it. But since she couldn't say the prince was blackmailing her, besides, it's not exactly true. And at that moment, the assistant remembered something important and decided to tell. It turned out that a priest came and asked for Lady Sasha's hair. Olga saw something strange in it, because she did not understand why it was necessary. Could it have anything to do with what the girls were dying over? To which the girl's father asked what she had said to him. Olga reassured him, and said she had given him nothing back. The girl was very glad that her assistant was very responsible about it, and would not agree to something like this. As it turned out later, the place is crammed with all sorts of spells, and no one had realized it before. The girl felt it as soon as she approached this place, and apparently because of that, terrible things are happening here. Sasha would never notice this if she wasn't a vampire, and the only question is what it's all done for, and who needs it. But there was very little time to clarify this, and besides, everyone was already expecting the bride to appear. With every second and every step, the girl thought more and more that maybe she had made a big mistake, and it wasn't too late to give up. But since she's alive now and obligated to fulfill his wishes, she had no other choice. Sasha could hear perfectly well the chatter of those around her that she was on doom. And since this was the last wedding he was entitled to, most were just waiting for it to end so they could go home. But this time, things could be very different. And maybe because she's a vampire, she can survive the ordeal. When Sasha saw her fiancé 10 years later, she didn't expect him to be so masculine and much better looking than the last time she had seen him. When suddenly, the moment came when they were told they could kiss. But first, by all rules, the groom must see his bride's face to know who he's marrying. Had to lift the translucent fabric that slightly hid her face, and when he did, all the invited guests were surprised by the incredible beauty of the girl. They immediately started talking about it, because she was really gorgeous. But also, every single person in this room didn't want to once again see how another nice lady will just die a few seconds later, and her beauty, unfortunately, won't help her. But the most interesting thing is that the prince invited a girl with black hair. That's how he knows her from that time. And since the girl in front of him is blonde, he didn't realize who she was at first. To which the girl replied that she was the one who would always be on his side. But apparently he didn't quite get it, and didn't remember what that meant. The boy began to remember where he might have heard such a familiar voice. He thought about it for too long, and tried to figure out why the brunette had been replaced by a blonde with red hair. But it was already time for a kiss. And surprisingly, the girl didn't turn off as sad as all the others before. It was like she was confident, though maybe just resigned to it, with the fact that she had no other choice anyway. Plus she'd lived much longer thanks to his help a few years ago, so she wasn't losing anything. They looked like a very handsome couple from the outside, and it would be a shame if this was the last moment they do it. The girl thought about the fact that if she had to do it, it had to be right. It's been 10 years since she was saved by a wizard and became a vampire. It would be a lie to say that she has no regrets. The girl thinks about it very often, but at the same time realizes that it was necessary. Otherwise, she would never have come to her senses. And since she had once been saved, the moment had come when she should be thankful to do what she had promised then in the woods. After the kiss, a lot of time has passed and surprisingly nothing bad happens. The guests look forward to when their expectations are met. But this time, apparently their next series, as they call it, nothing interesting happened in it. And so far the girl feels fine. She doesn't start coughing or feel like she's about to pass out. It seems that even the prince, up to this moment, had been absolutely certain that such a thing could not be, and was already prepared for the fact that he had missed his last chance to marry. Sasha was smiling, and it was obvious that she hadn't expected it herself. The prince decided to lose no time, and together with his bride, he went to his father to say something to him. He wanted to ask if he could ask for his permission and blessing for this event, to which his father replied that he would be happy if the two of them were happy in this relationship. And the only person who didn't want his fiancée to survive was his father's wife. For now, all her plans had gone awry, and her son would never be again. Even from her reaction it was obvious that she wasn't hiding her real emotions at all. And since Sasha had the amazing ability to see all the real feelings and emotions of the people around her, in her husband's father, she immediately noticed the selfishness and greed. It was really very noticeable even to those who did not have the ability to see what the man was really thinking. His wife evidently showed a desire to appear much better than she really is, for there is nothing good in her thoughts. And her daughter had all the same things as this woman. It was no wonder to her that it was mother and daughter, for they even had characters very much alike. The girl somehow unmistakably realized that the queen had a lot of bad intentions, and maybe everything that had happened before with a lot of girls was her plan. And when it didn't work out this time, she didn't even hide the fact that she was upset, because she didn't think it would be any different. But the most severe case was that of her fiancé. He showed loneliness and deep despair. He always looks very sad, because he has nothing pleasant in his life, and a man who loves him or can support him. But it seems from this day, such a person appeared in his life, and now he will not be alone, as his fiancée is a very nice girl. She will be able to make him happier. But because she still hates that day because she could have died, she's not completely good to him yet, even though she owed it to him for saving her years ago. The moment had come when the royal wedding ceremony could be finalized, and luckily, this time the prince finally had a wife. When they were alone together, he decided to ask, as he still didn't understand why she had changed so much in appearance, since she had been different before. Prince still has the feeling that in fact in front of him is not the Sasha he knows, but a completely different girl. He was very curious to know what happened to her. After all, she used to have very dark hair, and now it was very light. But what surprised him the most was that her eye color had changed. But apparently she decided not to tell him the truth, and said that her eye color changed after she was attacked by the monster that night. And the prince believed it. And yet the change in her appearance he is beginning to like, because the girl does look very beautiful. He is very glad she is still alive. At this point, an assistant came up to remind him that they must now prepare for the night the newlyweds spend immediately after the wedding. It's called the wedding night, but it seems that because of the amazing events, they've forgotten all about it. To be prepared for this, a room with a bathroom was already prepared for the girl, where she could clean herself up, and she was also assisted by a helper. So Sasha didn't even have to do anything because her assistant did it for her. And when she was ready to meet her husband, she was sitting in the room in a very nice outfit. He will definitely love it. But with every second she was getting more and more worried, because she had never had this before. Sasha doesn't even know what to talk about at such moments. And during the wedding, she didn't even hope that this moment would come at all. Like, all of a sudden, a guy walks into this room, and he also seems ready for this night. When he got out of the shower, he looked even better for some reason. But first he asked if his wife was ready, and if he could come into the room. This very moment, they felt too awkward. For example, the prince. He never had it down to this point as all his brides didn't live up to it. And Sasha also didn't know how it all happened. Because I've never been married. Because of the fact that they don't say anything. Every moment, it gets more and more complicated. In order to fix it somehow, the guy asked why she was nervous, although in fact he himself was not different from her this moment. And he also wondered where the brave lady who took the initiative in the first kiss had gone to. As suddenly, in order for her not to be afraid of anything, he warned that nothing would happen, so you can calm down. It really helped incredibly. She felt so much better. And when she answered nothing for a few seconds, the prince decided to make a joke, and asked if she had expected otherwise, and had been expecting this all along. And at last the moment came when she ventured to answer him. The girl said that he was very much mistaken, and she had come to the palace only because of the promise of a... After a while, they decided to rest after this busy day after all, and not lose the opportunity to get a good night's sleep. Then, they went straight to bed, and didn't talk about anything else. They didn't even look at each other. Weren't they at all interested in talking about anything, and remembering how they met? As suddenly, the guy was still interested in asking her one question, so he asked if she could answer it, to which the girl said she would be happy to hear him out. He said he understood perfectly well that she had been forced to accept his offer and couldn't refuse, but still he wondered what she wanted because of it, that she had become a princess, to which she replied that she had no such thoughts, and up to that point she hadn't even considered it, so she had no goals in mind. It turns out that he asked that question for a reason, and one day, she'll have to really decide what she's going to do as a princess. She was asked about it even by her assistant, for she was also interested in the girl's opinion, to which she replied that it was necessary to make them want to throw her out of the palace. She wanted to show she wasn't worthy of the title without hurting her family. One of the reasons for this decision was that she would not be able to produce an heir, so this development is only a temporary matter. And now that they're talking to her husband about it, she's trying to convince him that she really doesn't have any plans, to which the prince replied that it was a good enough option. Besides, the queen was going to make her invisible anyway, so she wouldn't even have to try. When the princess heard about it, she didn't expect him to do that, for he was the reason she was here. But that wasn't the only question he wanted answered. After that, he also asked if she was telling the truth then years ago. He was so curious to know the answer to this that he even turned in her direction, looked her straight in the eyes, and expected to hear something. All he wanted to know was whether the princess would really be on his side in any situation, and whether she would renege on her promise to him, to which the princess replied that if she ever had to choose, it would be him anyway, and there was no doubt about it. The girl is sure that they can never be a happy couple, but at the same time she is surprised that he is a very good husband, and it is nice to talk to him, unlike some people she has talked to before. The next day came, and as it is customary, in honor of the wedding, they decided to hold a banquet, and since Sasha is a vampire, she asked to do it in the evening. But it was even better. Many guests liked the unusual evening atmosphere, because usually everyone is used to organize such events in the daytime, but in the evening it was much more interesting. But they all had no idea that it was for a reason, and there was indeed a very important meaning in holding the event in the evening. While Sasha was talking to her assistant and discussing the wedding, her husband stealthily approached her. He wanted to meet the girl's assistant, because they hadn't had a chance to do so until now. He asked what her name was, to which the assistant replied that her name was Olga, and she was very happy to make the acquaintance. Afterward, he asked her to bring her stomach medicine from the royal apothecary, because there was a chance that it would come in handy for his wife, and it was better to do it beforehand. But Sasha still didn't understand if dinner with his family would be so awful that it was so necessary to prepare all the medications. But apparently he didn't want to tell her anything in advance, and instead said she'd find out eventually. Afterward, they went to the banquet, and when they entered the guests, someone immediately announced their appearance. Even though there was a good reason for this banquet, even so, there was an unpleasant atmosphere. Right after they entered this room, Sasha immediately noticed the disgruntled looks of everyone present, and the amazing thing was that they didn't even hide it. When suddenly Erica came running up to them, she was acting too strange and immediately attacked the prince. It's like she didn't care that he already had a legal wife and wasn't interested in other girls. She immediately started telling him that she wanted to apologize to him. It was like she needed to act more brave, but she made the decision that she wasn't going to hold back her feelings anymore. And of course the guy didn't like it. He didn't understand why she was allowing herself to do that, much less in the presence of a princess. She looked very unconcerned. The girl began to say that she could make him happy, and asked him to notice how sad she was without him. The guy is sick of her behavior because she's really too much of a control freak. No matter how much the girl wanted to ride nice, the princess still saw right through her, and understood what she was doing it for. The girl's mother joined the play. She asked the prince if he didn't feel sorry for Erica, because she only thought of him, to which the man said he should appreciate her a little more, because she was a very good girl. But why they say it in front of his wife is unknown, and when the prince couldn't take it anymore, he asked her to get away from him. Otherwise she'll regret it very much that she ever came near him. Now it was clear to the princess why she would need the cure, because this meeting was not going to end well, as suddenly, she noticed that there were even more spells in this room that were made to harm the princess. But who could have done it? Despite all the strangeness of what was happening, the princess tried not to give in to manipulation, and just laughed with this girl, who apparently just does not see herself from the outside. Most of all, she didn't want anyone paying attention to her at all, because she had no desire to socialize with these people. But unfortunately she has to talk to them once in a while because they are her husband's family, and if she doesn't, she'll be treated even worse, and she doesn't want that, because the princess has learned exactly who each of them is. At that moment, her husband's free brother, Chelvi Vladimiro, approached her. He was the youngest of them all. He wanted to see the girl off, and during the greeting, the princess analyzed what kind of man he was. But somehow, she didn't feel anything bad from his side. When they were shown where they should sit, it was very strange that the husband and wife were sitting several meters away from each other, because this should not be the case. And what is the most amazing thing? Near the prince was Erica. And it becomes not hard to guess who came up with all this, and why Sasha was put on the other side of the table, which was more than 3 or 4 meters long. His parents explained that they thought it was not important for them, because the main thing is to be at the same table, and all these moments are not important enough to pay attention to it. When they started talking, someone immediately started a topic about how their first wedding night went, and also hinted that everyone would be expecting good news in the near future. Afterward, the king's wife reminded that there are royal rules that must be followed. After this night with her husband, Sasha needs to stay in a separate residence, to which the king replied that there were no such rules, for it would be much better if they were together, so that there would be an heir. After his words, the woman immediately whispered quietly to him that the curse on the prince would make her sick, and after that, she would immediately perish. So in order to fulfill their plan, they need to keep them separate until they make sure she is safe. But because the girl had special powers, she could hear their thoughts and understand what they were saying, and then she knew what they thought of her. As a result, the king did listen to his wife, and said that they really needed to respect the rules of the royal family, and it was advisable to remember and adhere to them. How suddenly, the prince finally decided to speak his mind, because he was sick of listening to other people constantly making his decision for him. The queen said she understood his frustration, but advised him to follow the rules, and afterward said she wasn't thrilled with them herself. Then, Sasha decided to take part in the conversation, and said that her health was fine, so she would like to fulfill her duty and give an heir as soon as possible. When someone wanted to change the subject, the girl again did not succumb to this manipulation, and continued to say what she thought. She said that above all, she admires her husband for all the 10 years they have spent apart, so she has absolutely no desire to be different from him anymore, and she'd do anything to make sure it doesn't happen again. And thus, she let everyone know that in this situation she fully supports her husband's opinion, and she is on his side despite any rules. This was the first time the queen began to realize that she was no longer going to decide for someone else what someone should do, because everyone is an adult who knows how to make good decisions. Plus, she knew without mistakenly knowing that the queen had only bad intentions for the princess, and that she had the goal of destroying Sasha. And to finally come to some result of this conversation, the king said that in his opinion the prince would sort out his own affairs, so the queen had better not get involved, and not try to do as only she wants to do. And finally, they started talking about another topic. The guy's father asking why he was so bad at following the royal territories, for the horses were beginning to die one after another, and that was very bad, to which the prince replied that he was trying to do his best to find out what was going on, but it would take him some more time to do so. And from that moment, everybody ceased to be so polite. The king said he was ashamed to have such a one as him as his son, but the guy was not confused and knew what to answer. He said that he also would not have chosen to be born in such a family, and of course the king did not expect such an answer, so he got very angry. He couldn't stand it and poured his drink on his son's face. How unpleasant it was for him to hear such a thing, except the man doesn't notice that his son responds to him in the exact same way, and communicates with him in the exact same way that he does. So in this situation, he poured that drink himself, and he was uncomfortable talking to himself. When the princess saw this, she never thought any of them were capable of such a thing, and that all had only bad thoughts and intentions, and would never do such actions in the open. At this point, Erica immediately seized the moment, and said that she was about to get him a towel and help him, to which he replied that the best thing she could do in this situation was to just not talk to him and move away from him. At such moments, the princess begins to realize that the prince is actually a very good man, and that he has had to put up with this kind of treatment from his family all his life. And since he had no friends and acquaintances with whom he spent his free time, he never knew what love, care, and support were. All his life he was used to feeling the opposite, and it is a wonder he did not become like his surroundings. Before, his father was very different, and when his mother was alive, things were much better than they are now. The king respected every inhabitant of the country, was a loving and kind husband, rejoiced the most when his previous queen became pregnant. But when Courtney became his mistress, everything began to irrevocably change for the worse. The king became a completely different person, which even people sometimes did not recognize, because his behavior has changed very much. Among the nobility, there are some rumors about the sudden change in the king's character, for it was so marked that it could not be ignored or overlooked. The prince told the girl that already many people suspect that his new wife is manipulating him with magic and something like that. And as the girl saw with her own eyes a lot of spells all over the palace, she began to think that perhaps all the previous brides died because of this, because the queen just wanted to make her daughter become a princess, and instead of a prince, it was another guy. It's just amazing because in her opinion, no one has the right to decide and influence anyone else's life. As suddenly, someone asked the princess why she still hadn't touched her food. But the princess didn't know how to answer that, because it was obvious that she had been poisoned. So, in order not to be suspected of having realized something, she said she was just nervous and had lost her appetite, to which one guy replied that it happens, and there's nothing wrong with it. As the girl looked at all these people, she was very grateful to the wizard who had once saved her, for thanks to him, she had an ability which enabled her to see danger and to keep herself safe. But even that phrase didn't escape Erica. It felt like she was always trying to ruin any conversation and was acting that way on purpose. Erica immediately spoke about how she has known the prince for much longer, so she deserves to be with him, and someday that moment will come. She remembered all those moments when she felt hot for Paris, because he was constantly treated badly by even the closest of people. Sasha was horrified to imagine how long it had been treating him like this, and how he felt now in the presence of these people, because he had no one else but them. Afterwards, Erica asked permission to say something. She said she wanted to marry him. Doesn't she ever think about how she looks and what people will think of her? Sasha was really surprised by her, and at the same time realized that she had yet to get to know these people, because surely they were much better behaved now than they would have been if they were already used to each other and behaved as they usually did, and without hiding their emotions and attitudes towards each other. She began to say some strange words, as if she had long ago noticed that Paris might be secretly in love with her, but for some reason he hadn't admitted it yet. And the fact that they kept their feelings hidden from their family and strangers so that no one would ever find out. But there came a point when Erica couldn't take it anymore, and she's trying to do everything she can to keep them together. To which the password replied that something like that was forbidden in this kingdom, and there was no way a prince could have two wives. Then the queen said that she thought it wasn't a bad idea. No surprise on her part. She was just supporting her daughter. Then, she whispered to her husband that it remained to be seen what would happen to one of them, and it would be nice for the prince to have two of them. The prince's younger brother said that if someone wanted to do that, they would have to change the royal laws, to which the queen replied that there was no problem with that, and it should be much better that way. Paris was already tired of listening to the conversation on this topic, so he said that in any case he did not support such an option, and if the queen wants it so much, let her son have two wives, and for her was not necessary to make a decision for her. When he answered the queen in this way, the king became very angry, but the woman as usual tried to calm him down, and said that the prince spoke thus because he was sitting right in front of his wife, and he himself must have liked the idea, so she advised him to change the laws. And of course Erica didn't miss the opportunity, and wondered why she hadn't thought of it sooner. After this, the prince turned to his wife and asked her opinion. He hoped very much that she was also against the idea, and would be able to support him, to which she replied that she completely agrees with him, and is also against such an idea and something like that. She will never support. The girl is sure that changing the rules of the kingdom is wrong. And then, she decided to punish the queen a little for her idea, because if she's offering such an option, she probably doesn't mind if she's not the king's only wife, and if she feels like it, they can vote on the idea. And apparently from now on, there will be two queens in the palace, because if a prince, in her opinion, should have two wives, then the king should also conform to these rules, because that's what's fair, right? And of course none of them had expected such an answer from her, for they were all sure that Sasha would never say it or think of such a thing. When the queen suggested it, she did not even think that this decision could affect her, for surely she herself would not have wanted to be one of her husband's wives. Now it is obvious that in this way, she only wanted to harm the relationship of the prince and princess. After that, Sasha continued talking, and said that it wasn't a matter of personal preference. It was all for the good of the kingdom, and if someone passed such a law, then everyone should abide by it. At that moment, the king looked at his wife, because he wanted to see her reaction. Besides, she herself had recently proposed this option, so it was strange that now she was refusing it. In order to get rid of the awkward pause, the king suggested to postpone this conversation to another time, because now was not the best time. And besides, they were gathered here for another reason. All this time the princess's assistant was standing outside the door. It was so that if any situation occurred, she could quickly help if needed. When the banquet came to an end, the girl decided to talk to her assistant. But as it turned out, it was not the best moment. When Olga asked her how she was feeling, the girl replied that she was all right. And then she showed her the medicine she had originally brought just in case. But at that moment, the queen came up to them. She made a fake smile and asked if they could talk. But why would she do that? Since it was obvious that nothing good was going to come of this conversation, and she clearly had bad intentions. But she had no other choice. Sasha immediately agreed to the proposal because if she didn't, it would be a mistake. But for some reason, the queen suggested going out late at night, and most likely it was for a reason, because nothing good can be expected from him. The queen had said the garden under the moonlight was a great place to sort out thoughts, but it was all too obvious that wasn't the only reason they were here at this hour. It would have been possible to discuss everything inside the palace, especially at this late hour. But suddenly the queen decided to start the conversation. And then there was a situation where it was immediately clear whether it was accidental or not. The queen for some reason hit the princess's assistant, and it happened too unexpectedly. Besides, Olga did not do anything bad to her. At that, they never even talked before. Why the queen could hate her so much, the princess simply did not understand. She ran up to her at once, for she wanted to help her. It was not clear to them why the woman did it, because she asked to talk. But instead, it turned out that a person who was not guilty of anything was injured. As it turned out, according to this woman, assistants should deal with the consequences of their master's mistakes. But what she means, still, no one understands. After that, she ceased to be and seem kind. She began to ask if she had not been taught manners, and a princess would do well to show courtesy to her queen. Now Sasha was sure that it was probably the same way the queen treated the prince all the time, and most likely something like this happened to him every day. The princess replied that the queen was talking about some manners, while acting not polite enough herself, and in this situation even too horrible. For such an answer, the queen decided to do the same to the princess. She wanted to hit her, but the girl reacted in time, and she managed to defend herself. She grabbed the queen's hand, and pressed it very hard, so that she would finally realize that she had no right to behave like this towards people who had done nothing wrong for him. And when she let go of her hand, she was in a lot of pain. Sasha reiterated that if the queen had something against her, she should talk and find out with her, not her assistant. And also Sasha will never forgive her for daring to hurt her assistant. At that moment, Prince Paris came up to them, and it wouldn't even be surprising if the queen pretended that nothing had happened. And even if it did, it wasn't her fault at all. As he approached, he at once began to look into the queen's eyes, for in any case he knew perfectly well what sort of a person she was, and however she pretended, he was sure she would say the wrong thing. The woman immediately started to ask if he had seen the princess attack her for training her assistant, but instead of listening to her, he went over to his girlfriend, for he saw that she was upset about something, and tried to comfort the princess, for she had suffered for nothing. The prince took her hand, for he wanted to leave this place with her, for it was impossible to be in the presence of the queen. He knew perfectly well how the princess was feeling now, for he had lived under such conditions for several years, and knew perfectly well what it was like to. The guy made sure the girl went to her room and wasn't around this woman. The princess immediately started questioning Olga about whether she was okay and how she was feeling. She wanted to take a close look at any injuries she might have, to which she replied that she's fine. And most surprisingly, she's glad she's the one who took the hit. and not the princess. But the girl didn't understand why she was saying that. After all, there was nothing good in this situation, and the queen had only the queen to blame. The girl said that if she had known what would happen as a result, she would never have agreed to this conversation. In yet another situation, the girl made sure that her assistant was a very good person, and even though she was very badly hurt, she was genuinely glad that it didn't happen to the princess, as suddenly, the prince came into their room, and the first thing he said was that she said she wouldn't attract unnecessary attention, and to be in any conflicts with the queen should only be him, and the princess should be involved, for it was his duty to do his best to make sure that the queen could never harm her. So he asked her to talk less to her, to which the girl replied that she would try to listen to him, and would remember everything he said, for she realized that it was undesirable for her even to be near the queen, much less to talk to her and create conflicts. After the conversation, the prince immediately left and offered her a rest, to which the girl asked if he had some unforeseen business that made him need to go somewhere else. But apparently he was in such a bad mood that he answered a bit rudely. He asked since when they started discussing something like that, and why he should tell her about it. So he asked her not to interfere in his affairs, when she suddenly felt sick. It happened so fast that the girl didn't expect it, and it was at that moment that she realized why, a while ago, he'd been so insistent on getting her medication for her, because at such times it is really necessary. In addition, when such a situation occurs, there is very little time to somehow improve health and drink the necessary medicine, so it is desirable to always carry it with you. And also, Sasha learned for what reason he knew immediately that it would be necessary, because every day for many years in a row, he had such horrible lunches that could make you poison yourself. She felt his kindness, and what a good man he was. It was really very noticeable. When the girl began to remember today, and what had happened, she realized that she had made some mistakes, and because of her actions, suffered dear to her person, who was not guilty of anything. So, she decided never to make such a mistake again, and to do everything possible to make sure that no one else gets hurt, because if it happens again, she will never forgive herself. She promised Olga that this was the last time she would get into any trouble because of her, and now she would think many times about whether she should agree to something like this, especially from someone like the queen. Since then, she had never seen the prince or spoken to him on any subject. She even thought that he might have taken offense and was purposely not appearing near her. The whole time she was thinking that maybe she needed to make amends or think about her behavior, to which the girl replied that she would try to listen to him, and would remember everything he said, for she realized that it was undesirable for her to be even near the queen, much less to talk to her and create conflicts. After the conversation, the prince immediately left and offered her a rest, to which the girl asked if he had some unforeseen business that made him need to go somewhere else. But apparently he was in such a bad mood that he answered a bit rudely. He asked since when they started discussing something like that, and why he should tell her about it. So he asked her not to interfere in his affairs, when she suddenly felt sick. It happened so fast that the girl didn't expect it, and it was at that moment that she realized why, a while ago, he'd been so insistent on getting her medication for her, because at such times it is really necessary. In addition, when such a situation occurs, there is very little time to somehow improve health and drink the necessary medicine, so it is desirable to always carry it with you. And also, Sasha learned for what reason he knew immediately that it would be necessary, because every day for many years in a row, he had such horrible lunches that could make you poison yourself. She felt his kindness, and what a good man he was. It was really very noticeable. When the girl began to remember today, and what had happened, she realized that she had made some mistakes, and because of her actions, suffered dear to her person, who was not guilty of anything. So she decided to never make such a mistake again, and to do everything possible to make sure that no one else gets hurt, because if it happens again, she will never forgive herself for it. She promised Olga that this was the last time she would get into any trouble because of her, and now she would think many times about whether she should agree to something like this, especially from someone like the queen. Since then, she had never seen the prince or spoken to him on any subject. She even thought that he might have taken offense and was purposely not appearing near her. The whole time she was thinking that maybe she needed to make amends or think about her behavior, And it was at that moment that she realized why, a while ago, he'd been so insistent on getting her medication for her. Because at such times it is really necessary. In addition, when such a situation occurs, there is very little time to somehow improve health and drink the necessary medicine, so it is desirable to always carry it with you. And also, Sasha learned for what reason he knew immediately that it would be necessary. Because every day for many years in a row he had such horrible lunches that could make you poison yourself. She sensed his kindness and what a good man he was. It was really very noticeable. When the girl began to remember today and what had happened, she realized that she had made some mistakes, and because of her actions, suffered dear to her person, who was not guilty of anything. So she decided to never make such a mistake again, and to do everything possible to make sure that no one else gets hurt. Because if it happens again, she will never forgive herself for it. She promised Olga that this was the last time she would get into any trouble because of her, and now she would think many times about whether she should agree to something like this, especially from someone like the Queen. Since then, she had never seen the prince or spoken to him on any subject. She even thought that he might have taken offense and was purposely not appearing near her. The whole time she was thinking that maybe she needed to make amends or think about her behavior, when she suddenly felt sick. It happened so fast that the girl didn't expect it. And it was at that moment that she realized why, a while ago, he'd been so insistent on getting her medication for her. Because at such times it is really necessary. In addition, when such a situation occurs, there is very little time to somehow improve health and drink the necessary medicine, so it is desirable to always carry it with you. And also, Sasha learned for what reason he knew immediately that it would be necessary. Because every day for many years in a row, he had such horrible lunches that could make you poison yourself. She felt his kindness and what a good man he was. It was really very noticeable. When the girl began to remember today and what had happened, she realized that she had made some mistakes, and because of her actions, suffered dear to her person, who was not guilty of anything. So she decided to never make such a mistake again, and to do everything possible to make sure that no one else gets hurt. Because if it happens again, she will never forgive herself for it. She promised Olga that this was the last time she would get into any trouble because of her, and now she would think many times about whether she should agree to something like this, especially from someone like the Queen. Since then, she had never seen the prince or spoken to him on any subject. She even thought that he might have taken offense and was purposely not appearing near her. The whole time she was thinking that maybe she needed to make amends or think about her behavior,